welcome to the press conference for Call Me By Your Name. I was saying to these guys backstage, thank God we're sitting down because this movie just makes my knees buckle. Every time I think of it, I think it's so swoonily beautiful. And I'm very glad to be able to talk with stars Armie Hammer, Timothée Chalamet, and the director, Luca Guadagnino. Welcome all. Thank you very much for being here. Luca, I'm going to ask everybody on the panel a couple of questions, and then I'll open it up to your questions. So the usual drill, stick your hand up, let me know you're out there, and then we'll pick you all in order. So my first question is just the most general one. Luca, how did this come to you? What was your work like with James Ivory? Tell us a little bit about the backstory.
Well, it has been a long journey, and it has been a journey of surprises, because at the beginning I was invited to help understanding the map, the geographical map of the book by Aciman, by the producers who originated the project, Peter Spears and Howard Roseman. And so that the conversation that started like, okay, this is my idea of where the book is set, became slowly, in 10 years almost, a journey in which I moved from friend of the court to executive producer, and then to producer, and then to director and producer. Yeah.
Friend of the court, I love that. Armie, tell us a little bit about how what attracted you and what made you say yes.
I'd met Luca before. We met for some other reason. I don't remember what it was for, but we hit it off.
Well, because I admired you and I wanted to meet you, and you said, okay.
Thank you. So we'd spoken before, and then this script came across my agent's desk, and I got it, and then I read it, and I was like, whoa. I think I need to have a serious conversation with Luca about this. And I voiced my concerns. You know, I mean,
he wanted to pass.
I did want to pass. It scared me. I thought that this was going to require so much and push me so far. It just made me nervous, you know. But then, after having a series of great conversations with Luca, I came to the conclusion that because this made me feel, because it challenged me, it's the reason I have to take it. And I'm glad you talked me into it.
Was there a specific thing that scared you? Can you elaborate?
There was just like such a high level of intimacy that I'd never really done on camera before. I also have 2 little kids, and I just, you know, I was a little bit nervous about all the nudity that was originally in the script, and I just had images of my daughter being at school when she's like 13 years old, and like her friend, like people teasing her and like printing up pictures of my penis from the internet. Like I was just like, oh man. But I was completely won over once I saw everything from a different perspective than my own.
Yeah, welcome to the life of an actress, I'm sorry to say. Timothée, what about you? What was your reaction to the script?
Well, you know, I'd been searching for a project where I could have some sort of sexual experience with a fruit, and then this just seemed kind of like perfect.
This was his third choice. There was 2 others, but yeah.
No. But no, the serious answer is, you know, the opportunity to work with someone like Luca, the opportunity to work with someone like Armie, and then James Ivory, and then Sufjan Stevens to be acting over his music. These opportunities are few and far between for people my age. They really don't exist. And I feel like I know that because I've been reading the things that do exist. So it just, to wrestle with a role this complex, this meaty, to have a story that feels important and relevant, universally relatable, and maybe even has the capacity to help people realize things about themselves, then like you have to seize on that. So that was the thought process.
All right, you brought up the peach, so I have to ask you about this sure to be legendary peach sequence. What are the conversations you have around a sequence like that? How do you brace yourself?
Well, I'm sure Luke is gonna have something to add to this, but the first like thank you of sorts goes to Luca, because I remember so vividly that day that he wasn't treating it any differently than any other scene we shot. And I guess as an actor, it's like a young person's instinct too. You kind of look to whoever's guiding you and however they're feeling. And he was just treating it like everything else. Luca had practiced, made sure it was something that was possible. And hey, you've said that in other interviews. It's fine.
It's true.
And
not till the end.
And
I just couldn't. I love the book. It's fantastic. But that scene was really a contrivance for me because I couldn't believe. I could believe he's like Elio need to explore. But I technically didn't thought it was really working.
But it was
until
Luca
I
who
understood
came back
it
to
could
set
work.
and said, okay.
And I went back to him and said, I tried, it works. And he said, yeah, I tried too.
and then on the day, like it was just treated like everything else. I didn't feel like there was any ceremony around it. So it just kind of came and went.
So to speak. So talk about the atmosphere. Like, how much were you actually shooting in the house? What was the shoot like? Were you all sort of living together? Were you able to spend time really absorbing that place? Because so much of this movie, that place is evoked so beautifully. Tell us about the shoot.
We took over the city of Crema and the countryside around. They came in Crema. They were living in houses, not in the hotel. Actually, there are no hotels in Crema. So it was really a domestic routine where we were really hanging around all the time together and basically immersing. I lived there, so that was normal for me. But for them, was like being part of the place. And I think it was a quite smooth shoot. It was very laid back, very interesting. Yeah.
Did you two do anything to spend time together to develop a relationship?
Well, there was the gift of just how much time we did have to spend with one another before we started shooting, like 3-4 weeks, something like that. So it wasn't so much about what we were doing, although what we were doing was like espressos, Mike Tyson documentaries, things like that. And it was just, they say experience is the greatest teacher. So we just spent a lot of time with one another. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of the very physically intimate and emotionally intimate scenes were kind of on the tail end of the shoot too. So then we had all that time shooting together too to kind of...
Yeah, but we made a rehearsal at the very beginning and the intimacy was fantastic.
First day, we show up for rehearsals and we get to the villa where we shot almost the entire movie. And it's actually one villa and we shot on the grounds and property around there. And we get to this house and we're like, wow, look, this is all so new and so different. And Luca goes, why don't we just do a quick rehearsal? And we're like, yeah, great,
nice,
sure, we'd
nice.
love to. Let's get into it. He goes, okay, let's just do, I don't know, scene 62. And we're like, okay, 62. And basically, there's nothing that happens in the scene other than Oliver and Elio kissing. So he's like, let's go in the backyard. And we're like, okay. And he goes, why don't you just do it right here? And he points to a spot on the ground. And we're like, just rehearse the scene. He's like, yeah, go, go, go. And we're like, all right, here we go. Let's break the ice. And then we just, he had Timmy and I make out on the ground and roll around for a bit. And then he was like,
and I left.
He's like, let's try it again. Okay, that's good. Bye, guys. And then he left. And that was the end of our rehearsal on our first day.
So just do this thing, get it over with immediately, and then you're there, right? Was that your thinking?
I don't know. I think it is about, really, for me it's important that there is no embarrassment when you shoot a film. It's something really ridiculous when there is embarrassment. It irritates me when I see like, because it's first of all, it's acting. And second of all, I think it's there is no difference between scenes, dialogue, sex, action scene. It's just let's make it good. And let's make sure that it translates on screen, not only what the characters live, but also what they live, I would say. Open up.
Let's talk about the theme of the movie a little bit. How important is 1983 as a date here? I mean, we all know what was happening historically in the early 80s with AIDS and everything, and this is sort of poised on that moment just before the whole world knew the extent of what was happening. Was that a factor in the story? Was it? Talk to me about that choice of 1983.
I think I dated in 83 instead of 88 because I wanted to do something in a way at the beginning of this what they called Reaganian hedonism that came off of the Reagan era. And so there's still a sort of untamed sense of the wave that came out of this May '68 in the behavior of the parents and the conformism and the mentality that has been poisoned the well of our societies since Reagan wasn't yet arrived. So I wanted to have that kind of sort of moment in time where we were still apparently safe from that. Yeah.
So that what was going on in the relationship was about the relationship, sorry, and not their hesitancies were their personal hesitancies and not something bigger in the world, right?
Oh yeah. I think that I said May 68, and I can say that from May 68, the private is public and the public is private. I think the politics of desire of these two are strong and powerful enough to sustain any prosaic references to a timeline of events, which is not what a movie should necessarily be doing.
Yes, every movie has to echo in its time, right? Is there a reason that you're particularly glad to be putting this out right now, you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a movie like this is incredibly prescient and important whenever it comes out, because it does one of the beautiful functions that art is supposed to do, where someone's going to watch this and it's going to challenge them, it's going to challenge their sensibilities, and they're going to go, maybe love is love. Like, maybe I'd never saw it from that perspective, but just watching two human beings develop such an intense and beautiful bond with each other, it's nice.
And they're not fearful of being, in a way, in their own way, they mavericks, and to be individual and to be different. Like, I think that also there is the important aspect of the movie that is a movie about the transmission of knowledge between generations. And I come from a place, Italy, where we have been ruled for almost 2 decades by a prime minister that has infiltrated the imagery of our nation as a sort of perverted father of the enjoyment and not of the desire. Berlusconi, someone who has been making been trading the welcoming of the other for the injunction of enjoyment against the other. I think our neighbors down in America, they have now the same problem. So I think that to reaffirm the power of a father that is compassionate and that leads a transformation that grows into the other, it's something quite important to do.
Yeah, I've always thought that there was just as much drama in a movie where people behave well as there is in a movie where people behave badly, that you can have a moment of drama from somebody doing the right thing. And I feel like this movie is just full of that. Who has a question out here? Front row.
Good afternoon. Bruce Kirkland from the Toronto Sun. This picks up actually on something that Luca has said and that I think Armie is understating the case. So let me preface it quickly. A sensual, erotic, gay-themed film is not revolutionary. Thank the gods for that at this point in time. That said, in your country, maybe it's more important than is being said that a wonderful gay-themed, sensual film is coming out, starring you two. Do you want to elaborate, both of you, from...
Well, I appreciate that so much, because I hadn't, the way you framed that was really quite beautiful, and I hadn't seen it like that, because one of the things that's always really appealed to me about this film is the lack of an oppressor, whether that's by way of disease or by way of a group of people that are trying to mess with their relationship. But then when you say it like that, yeah, it kind of, that's what the amazing ride of this movie has been. And it was at Sundance, somebody in the Q&A raised their hand and they said, you know, I wish my father had spoken to me the way Michael speaks to you in that film. And I guess reading the book, I realized the weight that was there emotionally, and certainly shooting it, but seeing the reaction now and the way people are talking about it, or even what you just said, that, you know, in the States right now where we are struggling with a sort of crackdown on life, yeah, that to make this kind of movie with the explicit thing I just mentioned, the lack of a violent aggressor is maybe like maybe the strongest antidote there could be. But I don't know. Yeah. Anyway.
We're in trouble down there. We need more than a movie, but any little bit helps. And you're right. This is a crazy, bizarre, weird, scary world, and anytime you can infuse a little bit of beauty and remind people that things might be terrible somewhere, they're probably worse somewhere else, they're probably better somewhere else, but such a big part of making this for us was going and having this experience. And I think that through Luca's genius, the viewer is provided a glimpse into that experience where you will feel like you have a summer vacation if you watch this movie. And I think that just that little bit of escapism can be nice too.
Yeah, the summer of your life, though. Yeah. Another question out there? Yes, please, in the stripes, second row.
Hi, Jan Price from iHeartRadio. Armie, you said this role scared you, and I'm sure it also scared you because you're just starting your career. What did you have to dig down deep inside in order to portray these wonderful characters?
You know, my background with acting is it's theater oriented, and that for me at least has always been way more like performative, and certainly you want to be conveying emotions appropriately, but there's a little bit of a stopgap or a distance between what you're going through and having to open up. And what's been kind of terrifying about this film stuff is if it's going to be any good and the camera's that close, it has to be, you know, quote unquote real, or all the cliches you hear. And certainly with this, you know, it's a love story. So that was the most, getting that across was the scariest bit, but that almost has little to do with us and has everything to do with him, and we couldn't have been in better hands to capture those moments accurately. And then I guess another slight anxiety I would have had was not having the command of the Italian language or the piano pieces the way it's described in the book. But again, it was Luca's idea. I just finished a play in New York, and he said, come out to Italy right away, you know, get out there about a month and a half early. And I worked with a man named Roberto Solci, who's a brilliant Italian composer who lives underneath Luca in Crema. And we worked on the piano every day, and I worked with an Italian teacher. And then we finally got there. So both of the anxieties I had, like I said, capturing the truth in those intimate moments and getting whatever was appropriate to the character in the book, Luca really put me at ease almost immediately.
And for me personally, it wasn't really so much about digging down and it wasn't about a struggle. It wasn't about any sort of like consternation or anything. It was more about feeling comfortable and safe enough to allow someone like Luca to push you, and to, more than me digging something out, it was you know, through collaboration, him pulling something out, and hopefully us going somewhere where, as an artist, I've never gone before, and being pushed and being challenged. And then what you learn from that, the experience, and who it teaches, or what it teaches you about yourself, what it teaches you about the characters, and just letting go and trusting Luca. It's not always the easiest thing.
Bertolucci says something very interesting from this perspective. He says that when he makes a movie, he tries to not only portray the narration and the characters in the film, but also to make a sort of X-ray of the actors and actresses playing. And sometimes Bernardo had sort of falling apart with some of his performers because watching the movie, they felt like as if he was penetrating them. And it's a great lesson. And when I always think about his words, because it's interesting to see not only the acting. That's cool. But it's important to see also the transparency of the people in the film.
Does it change the way you want to work in the future? Having taken on something that scared you, do you now think you'll choose your roles differently or more?
It's like the immersiveness of the experience that I'm so envious of now, because and we shot on one lens. You almost forgot the camera was there, and like I said, Luca wouldn't treat scenes with any sort of ceremony based on what they were. We were just trying to make a good film, and you know, and since shooting a movie on a stage or whatever, you don't get that. You're not immersed in it. There's for me at least, there's been an awareness of movie making that on this, also maybe by way of the international crew we were working with, Sayambu Muktipram and Fernanda, our makeup designer, and Manolo, our hair designer. It just felt timeless, and it didn't feel like we were sometimes you had to remind yourself that the lens, that the people were going to see this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel, honestly, I hope you take this the way I mean it, which is the right way, which is that I feel like this is a movie that we were waiting for you to make. Like, I think it showcases everything that is great about what you can do, and maybe you were waiting for that moment, that risk to come along that was the right risk to take. What do you think?
Thank you.
Anybody else out there? Yes. Second row, please. The mic is coming.
Giovanna Grassi, Corriere della Sera, Italy. I really don't consider this movie a gay movie. Really, it's totally different from some gay, also sensitive movie. So I wanted to know your opinion. Is a way to tell us how difficult sometimes it is to growing up and to live, but it's not a gay movie.
I'm trying to be a bit, now I'm trying to get back into my first role when I was a film critic. I am European, and our cinema comes from a different ground. American cinema is about the genre, invented the genres. And there is a sort of inexhausted need of creating boxes for movies into genre. We had also the new Hollywood who contaminated genres. And then you had like the masterpieces like An American Werewolf in London. What you can say it's a horror movie, but it's a comedy. So like things were always kept moving, but still within the boundaries of a genre and a category. And then among the roster of the classic genres, the musical, the western, the war, the drama, the noir, the horror, the fantasy, we started to have more genre, to the degree in which there are also the indie movie genre, then the gay movie genre, and within the gay movie genre there is different genre of gay movies. This is kind of foreign to me. As a filmmaker, because I am coming from a different ground, and a movie is a movie, and I've been experiencing as an audience films both from this side and that side, and been fascinated by both. But in a way, I am a filmmaker that comes from the European canon, where I'm not asking myself to fit the box. I'm asking myself to tell the best way possible a story that I love, and characters that I am completely in love with. So, to a certain extent, it is a gay movie because of they are having, let's say, a gay intercourse, an experience. But in the same time, it is not a gay movie because it's a movie about Elio and Oliver. And who knows what Elio and Oliver will end up being in the future. And by the way, maybe we are making the first bisexual movie. Well, let's not discriminate bisexuals.
Anybody? Yes?
It's a Jewish movie, or it's a Lombardy movie.
Yeah. Here in the...
Hi, Kenny from All Film Magazine Indonesia. For me, the most heartbreaking part of the film is the last scene. And I like to ask Luca, how many takes do you shoot for that scene? And for Timothée, what was on your mind when you shoot that particular scene? Thank you.
I think we had 3 or 4 takes, and there was like dry, wet, very wet.
Yes.
I think that was it. Like I said, Timmy, I need one dry, one like with a little bit of tears, and then one very tearful.
Which one was it?
The half and half. So we made a compromise.
The other one was probably too big or something, right? No. Well, there was such a great gift in that scene, and that we had the song by Sufjan Stevens that's playing. I had a little earpiece so I could hear what kind of shape the song was taking and what bits it was entering. So there was kind of like the desire to play whatever was happening in the song. It almost feels like an acting exercise or something. But then there's obviously what is specifically happening within the story and what's happening to the character in that moment. And it's love lost, it's grief, it's reminiscing, it's happiness that it happened, it's sadness that it's over. And I don't know, maybe a little bit of hope that something of this genre will happen again with him or someone else.
And it was the day before the last day, I think, that we shot that scene. So there was a sense of also, like for us, it was a bit moving because it was just the end of a great experience we had. But I would say that to have the song by Sufjan was a great gift.
Yeah, that was really, really...
Because you hear the song at the end of the film, but he plays the song in a way with your performance.
Right, because that little earpiece, it really wasn't, it was, we had given it some thought to do it without. And in fact, we may have done one take without, but I think certainly the one in the movie, I had the little earpiece.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question? Yes, here.
Thank you. Hi, Vincent Dadd, BBC World Service Radio. Two related questions on the locations. One for Armie, because I only very recently saw the Giacometti movie, where, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you ever went to Paris, or barely, maybe not at all. So I wonder how different it is for the actor when you are actually in the locations, and then bouncing back to the director, I wonder in a film where the locations are so beautiful, whether there's always a danger the locations almost become the film, and vice versa.
Yeah, we filmed the entirety of the final portrait in Twickenham. We never even left the stages, including some of the driving scenes. It's just very different. That movie is, it's very much about Giacometti's world, and his world was his studio and his bed, and that's all he knew. He went to the cafe, and then he painted, and that was really it. So it really served that project to not have these amazing locations. It was so much more about what was happening between these two people. And I don't want to step on Luca's answer, but I certainly felt like the villa was a character in our movie, and I certainly felt like the roads that we rode the bikes on was a character, and it all added. It was all kind of part and parcel to what we were there doing in this beautiful town, in this beautiful place, working with beautiful people. It was, to me, it felt like a character. I fell in love with Crema.
For me, it's important to shoot in the place that the action takes place. It's crucial. I struggle to use another location for something. I did that maybe. A bigger splash in the flashbacks. It's Milan. It's not New York, but that was brief moments. I don't know if. I believe that we live in space, and the space is our personal space, is the place that makes us, and we morph the space according to our behaviors. So it's important that if the characters are portrayed in the space, not in a generic environment, and that's why I pull the cameras back as I can, and I make them in context. So the book by Aciman is about summer in Italy by the sea. This is a summer in Italy by the river in the countryside. And yes, the location has to become a protagonist. I try, and I don't like to go to avoid. I try to avoid, and I don't like to make postcards. That's something that is a sort of a huge danger. But I try to immerse them, like the house, it's, in a way, what I said before, it's something that has to do with an era that is not anymore. It's a house that is beautiful, but it was definitely, it's not used for the way it was supposed to be used when it was built and when it was lived by affluence. Now it's like sort of like a remain of an era that is not anymore, and you can feel that probably that house will be closed. That will be maybe the last summer. There is something sad about it, and at the same time there is something sweet about it.
I do want to ask you, you mentioned not wanting to make postcards, and I think that's very true about your movies. I think they're all very beautiful, but I think they all use beauty in different ways. Like I Am Love, I felt like the beauty was sort of a mask of what was going on, and A Bigger Splash, there was kind of a danger in that beauty. So in this one, you would say the beauty is maybe a little bit of bittersweet, like a little sorrow, or
You said it perfectly, and I thank you for this.
Anybody else? Yes, front row.
I'm from Gadio, UK. Something that was very powerful for me was you mentioned the scene with Michael Stuhlbarg and Timothy, and I think the theme of acceptance, being accepted by others, and self-acceptance. And I just wondered if you could say how important that theme was to you in making the film.
Yeah, I will let you answer for this. I think the scene is also a testament of not only the father and Elio, Perlman and Elio, but it's also about Michael and Timothy. I like that it's a sort of dead ringer of their relationship off camera, which is
Well, if
beautiful.
I'm not mistaken, that was the last scene he shot in the movie, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
by the way, I got to know Michael Stuhlbarg a few months later when I met him again at the Sundance Film Festival. I met another person because I met only Mr. Perlman during the entire shoot. He never got off character. It was very interesting.
And someone said it earlier, and I hadn't had this thought before, but that there's the expectation for that kind of scene to go in a different fashion, and that maybe Mr. Perlman's not as accepting, or maybe he doesn't want to broach the subject, maybe he never brings it up. So I think as you said, sometimes drama is when people do the right thing, and that's what I think is so oppressively wonderful about that moment, is how so many of us have, want to have that parent that sees you, that understands you, and that can talk and walk you through those moments in life when, especially at that age, you have no clue what you're doing. So, and then as Lucas said, because that was the last scene in the movie, and Michael, it was like a master class to work with an actor like him at a young age. He takes notes with a ruler. Which I think is very interesting. So by the end of it, by the time we shot that scene, it felt like a bow on the top of a big experience or something between the two of us.
But we were shooting, and then before we started the first take on the wide shot, he says, "Luca, Mr. Perlman throws casually things here and there in the book." And I forgot about it. I say, "Oh yeah, that's true." And so I said, "Action," and he take the book he's reading and he throws through on the other side of the table. That's like something invaluable. I mean, amazing. Yeah.
Anybody else with a question out there? Sort of to your question about how you say it can't be boxed in as a gay movie. I was saying backstage that I actually learned a lot about men from this movie, and I wish that I, as a 22-year-old girl, had seen this movie, because I feel like it would have saved me a lot of angst. In just looking at the way men talk to each other, and then looking at the way the women, who are so lovely in this movie, the young girls, how they approach these boys and what they expect from them, and how it's just even physically choreographed differently. Can you guys talk about, I mean, I know there's not really a big question in there, but can you just talk a little bit about that idea of sort of choreographing, how much you can convey even without words, the scenes where they're watching him dance, or the scenes where the girls ride up and then they ride away again. Talk to me a little bit about the wordless choreography that comes into a movie like this.
I don't know what to say. It's like you. The movie is it's a collection of individuals and identities, and in the first place, it's the community of the people who is making the film, and their individualities and the way they are, and that informs the way the characters are. So I guess, being a real voyeur, that I was trying to understand. I mean, not trying. I was understanding, and I was really making myself soaked into all of these people in front of the camera. And then, it's interesting because I think Marzia is Marzia, but it's also the Marzia of Esther Garel, and so for everybody else. So things happen because you have an intuition, you see a movement, you see something. Yeah. And maybe that day you have an idea, and then the other day you have another one.
Right.
And also, I think it's the way that André Aciman frames the kind of the love triangle in the book that's good, and it just plays out naturally, physically in the film. You put the three characters together, and there's going to be a certain tension that maybe is written, maybe is unwritten, maybe just happened. So,
yeah, it's palpable. We have time for one last question. If anybody out there has one, yes, in the back.
Hi, I'm Bradley Sparks, Extra. This is a question for Armie and Timothy. I'm just wondering, for young people or people in general who are going through a similar period of exploration or questioning that your characters are in the film, I wondered if there's a message you hope that they might take from the film.
I mean, I think that for me anyway, the entire message of this film is so beautifully distilled and boiled down to its most elemental form in Michael's speech, where it's all about self-acceptance, and it's all about self-realization, and it's all about figuring yourself out and being okay with yourself. Because guess what? You can be okay with yourself no matter what. I just think that there's such an important message in that, especially for me as a father of 2 kids. I can tell you that watching Michael deliver that speech forever changed the way I will deal with my children. You know, I mean, I think that there's such a beautiful message of acceptance and humanity there.
Wow, I could not have said that better. And now I will fail as I try. No, that's exactly it. And I feel quite fortunate that I got to grow up in New York, and that the idea of self-exploration, you know, being contaminated or not allowed altogether. Luckily, that wasn't a part of my growing up, and I have parents. I have a mom that saw this movie last night and freaked out for it. So, I guess what Armie said, I would just encourage any sort of self-acceptance and any sort of, you just gotta be kind to yourself. And it's especially tough today. Our millennial generation, it's saturated with judgment. I apologize to everybody in the room for my millennial generation. No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for bringing the film to the festival. It's so gorgeous. We're thrilled to have you here. Thank you for coming, and thank you all for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey You Guys!